Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about our first topic. I'm a little worked up today, and we've got two great topics to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is all of the refugees. We are seeing image after image of hundreds of thousands, upwards of 4 million Syrian refugees leaving the country, fleeing to anything that provides their family some safety. And we know that people are risking life and limb. They're trying to take their possessions with them, which is like extremely difficult. But there they are, flooding Europe, and there's a tremendous amount of pressure on all governments around the world to take in more folks. My guest today, Scott Michael. Scott, what do we know? You're in the world of refugees. What do we know about what it could possibly take for the United States to be involved and take 100,000 people?
Thanks, Christine. The United States has been a leader in resettling refugees for years. It's been averaging about 50 to 70,000 refugees each year that they help. So adding 100,000 Syrians would be a pretty big increase, but the numbers have been resettled in the past. Back in 1980, the U.S. resettled over 200,000 refugees, and in the early 90s, over 100,000 in some of those years. So it is possible, but I think the more important thing is just that this issue is being raised and people are talking about it and trying to decide what do we do to help these Syrians and these other people that have fled awful situations.
Well, there's certainly a lot of political challenges about us taking in that many people. I mean, I think right now the figure is maybe somewhere between 3,000 and 8,000. That's kind of a drop in the bucket of 100,000. Political challenges. We've already heard some of the presidential candidates who are getting a lot of the limelight today. And I'm not talking about Trump, but others who have said, no, we're not taking any.
Well, right now I think the U.S. has resettled about 1,500 Syrians, and the goal for next year is between 3,000 to 8,000, like you mentioned. So it would be a big challenge. The refugee program has very strict security checks. It's a very lengthy program, and so my work is mostly with refugees here as we try to help them once the U.S. government has given them the permission to come, has verified that they have a well-founded fear of persecution, and has done those security checks and background checks. So yes, it would be a very big challenge, but again, I think it's not so much the number as the idea that we do need to think about the Syrians and try to help them in whatever way we can.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to remind you our phone number is 547-8726 if you want to weigh in on this idea today. If you have an opinion about it, you want to make a comment, ask a question, we welcome your calls today. Why, from your experience, why do people risk everything to leave a country that they are very familiar with to go into basically the unknown?
Sure. Some of the Somalians that have been resettled in the refugee program have fled out of Somalia because of the fighting and the danger, and have ended up in refugee camps for years, 15, 20 years, some of them. One of them that's here in the Tri-Cities decided to tell her story, and most of the refugees don't tell their story. It's really personal, and they've been through a lot. But she said they were fleeing out of Somalia because of the fighting, and she and her family and other people, and they were hit by a mortar round. And that mortar round killed her husband and 2 sons. It killed the son that she was carrying on her back. And one other son that was traveling with other people was bitten by a snake and died. She lost her entire family. She was pregnant at the time, ended up in a refugee camp in Kenya, was there for 15 years. Her child, a young girl, grew up basically in that camp. And eventually they got the opportunity to come to the United States. So, and she wanted to tell her story, to be a witness of the innocent suffering of these people from Somalia. And that type of story has happened over and over again. That's the type of thing that's happening to innocent Syrians, to Iraqis who have fled, some of them having worked for the U.S. government and having to get out. So those are the kinds of things that they're dealing with, and that's why they can't go back home, and that's why after living in these camps for years, they're looking for a place to go.
Mm-hmm. It's hard for us to imagine that because our life here is so much different.
The security checks are very strict. As a matter of fact, I had somebody in my office the other day asking about her adult child, and it has been years, literally, that the case has been held up on security checks. So it's very thorough, and it, of course, it's a valid concern for all of us for security. We want our nation to be secure. So that's one of the good things about the U.S. refugee program is it's very, very systematic. People do not come in as new refugees quickly. It's very slow. You go through quite a process. You interview with a person from the Department of Homeland Security. So we definitely know who they are, and they're definitely coming in as guests of the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm. Well, how many people have we placed here in the Tri-Cities area over, like, let's say, any period of time, like 20 years?
Sure. Well, right now we're averaging about 200 people a year, and that includes children. So it's roughly about 40 or 50 families, and they can be single people, they can be elderly people. It runs the gamut. We have a number of refugees from Iraq, some of them, like I mentioned, that worked for the U.S. government and had to flee. We have refugees from Burma, now called Myanmar. A lot of them have been trapped in refugee camps in Thailand, or else kind of living a stateless existence in other countries, and like Malaysia, for example, and they really don't have any other options. When the U.S. government looks at refugees, they look at first, well, can they go back home? And if that's not possible, could they stay in that second country? And then if that's not possible, third country resettlement is considered. So it's really only after all those options are exhausted. And like I mentioned, the average stay in a refugee camp is years, not months.
Whoa. All right, we've got to take a break here, but we'll be back. We have more questions to ask of Scott to learn about refugees who have settled here in the Tri-Cities area and what that has been like for them. Stay with us. This is Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown.
Yes, I haven't heard that specifically, so feel free to contact me by email at World Relief, and I'd be happy to ask that question from somebody that deals more on the policy side. But I think that's not been the case here at World Relief in Tri-Cities. We have resettled Christians from Iraq, so I'm not sure exactly what your question refers to, but we definitely have resettled Christians from Iraq.
Hey, thanks for your call. To get 2,300 refugees to be placed in Idaho sounds like very unusual when the government hasn't approved anything beyond what our current numbers are, 3,000 to 7,000 annually.
So the refugees that the U.S. government resettles for the entire country would be approximately 70,000. And that number sounds very high for Twin Falls, Idaho, but since I don't resettle in Idaho, I really couldn't answer more about that question. I know in the Tri-Cities it's roughly about 225 refugees each year, and that number isn't changing drastically. We may be 240, but we're not at all talking about huge numbers right now in the Tri-Cities.
But we are talking about 40 families a year coming into our little region here. What is the most difficult hurdle that those folks, and they're coming from all points around the world, so what is their biggest hurdle here?
I think it's probably different for each family, but for many of them it's that difficult period between when they get here and they get their first job. And refugees usually go to work very quickly. So when they first arrive, they are guests of the U.S. government, and we partner with the U.S. government to help get them into an apartment, and we have amazing volunteers that help get that apartment ready. We have it usually set up with beds, pots and pans, kitchen table, that type of thing. Just the basics. They don't have a TV, they don't have a computer, but the basics to live and start a new life. And from there, we take them through a number of appointments to get a social security card, and refugees are eligible to work as soon as they get here. So getting them health screenings. A lot of them have been through really difficult things and need some attention with their health before they can work. But it's that window where we're trying to help them with those basic needs that is often very difficult, because financially they're worried about paying the rent, about surviving. And until they can get that first job and start paying those bills, I think that's when we see the most stress. And it can also come at different times, depending on things they've been through and when that starts to resurface. But generally speaking, it's those first few months.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a major concern. Bringing Muslims from other parts of the world here to the United States is a major concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks for that good question. I think that hasn't, the person that you're describing hasn't been my experience here in the Tri-Cities. So I've met hundreds of Muslims, and I've found them to be regular people just like me. And basically, what I found them to be is people that care about their kids getting an education and being able to grow up in safety. That's the number one thing that I've seen. And they care about having a job and participating in society. And as I brought my family a few years ago over to the Richland Mosque and the West Richland Mosque and enjoyed a meal with them, the people you're describing are not the people that I enjoyed a meal with and that shared hospitality with me and that have shown kindness and love to me and my family for years. So that's really my answer.
Okay. So how has been the reception of people here in the Tri-Cities to families that have resettled here?
It's been amazing. You know, we have so many churches that have reached out to the refugees. We have churches that provide English classes, that provide citizenship classes to help them apply for citizenship after they've been here 5 years. We have a church that has opened up a homework center to help the kids, because you can imagine how overwhelming it is to start school and you don't speak any English.
Right.
So they have a homework center to help the kids with their homework. We have a church that prepares a basket of hygiene and other household items for every single new refugee family, and a backpack with school supplies for every new refugee child. We have churches that help them to pay their rent before they get that first job. So we have volunteers who are mentors. Our biggest volunteer program is a mentor program where we pair a mentor from here in the Tri-Cities area with a new refugee family. The commitment from the mentor is a couple hours a week for 4 months of just spending time with that family, getting to know them, going out to ice cream together, taking them to Goodwill to get some extra clothing, helping them look at their junk mail, and explaining to them that no, you did not win a new car. That key will not work.
Okay.
So we have amazing volunteers, and our volunteers often say to us, this changed my life. This helped me more than I ever helped the refugees.
Mm-hmm. So can people, what do we need to do if we want to be involved in World Relief? Do we contact you? Is that, you got a
Sure, yeah,
volunteer program?
Our website is worldrelieftricities.org, and we actually have been so blessed lately with people wanting to volunteer that there's a little bit of a wait before we can get people processed. You know, we have an application process, we have background checks, we have screenings, and then we have an orientation to help them get ready to be a mentor. So, but check out worldrelieftricities.org, and that has a lot of information about our office.
All right. Scott Michael, I really appreciate your time with us today. We've learned a lot about understanding refugees coming into the United States and what's going on with those folks who are sitting in the refugee camps around the world. Oof. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.